Typically on QTNA, I'm the one asking the questions, but since this is a special QTNA number 50, a nice big round number, let's change it up a little bit. So Ashraf, you sent me an email with a question, so let's see if we can tackle that one together. Okay, so now let's look at the question together. So, in case there is a data breach involving SaaS, who's responsible? Okay, no offense, this question doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's okay because a lot of questions on certification exams, especially the CSSP exam, don't make sense. The exam, as we explain in our tutoring sessions, is a reading comprehension exam as much as it is a cybersecurity exam. So what do we think is going on here? Okay, so we're probably deploying some sort of SaaS model, which of course stands for software as a service. Remember, anytime we see as a service, that is referring to some sort of cloud-based infrastructure, right? Platform as a service, infrastructure as a service versus SaaS. So SaaS, of course, is when kind of the client is totally dependent on the cloud provider. So they're going to access that software not through downloading anything, but typically through a web browser. Sometimes they may need a plugin. But the point is, a lot of the responsibility kind of hangs out on that third-party provider. So that's kind of going to inform as I read through the answer choices here, right? So the SaaS client, well, that's kind of the opposite of what we just said, right? Because the SaaS client, they're the ones to be accessing it. So probably the client in the SaaS model isn't responsible for a whole bunch because they're paying a lot of money for the software and all the services to be housed somewhere else. So basically, they're not going to be responsible for it, right? So this one kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. Now the SaaS provider, well, if that one is the opposite of being right, and this one is the opposite, then this one we think is probably going to be the right answer, but let's keep looking. Neither the client or the provider. Okay, well that one doesn't make any sense, right? Because then if it's neither one of those, who's responsible? Like who else is there, right? So that one doesn't necessarily make sense. Further investigation is needed to determine who is responsible. Okay, interesting. So this one, I would consider potentially right as well. So now we're between B and D here.
A few minutes later.
Okay, so choosing between B and D here gets pretty tricky, right? In part because you have to separate exam reality from real reality, right? So D, I would say probably is what's going to happen in the real world, right? Because there's going to be some sort of further kind of investigation to what happened to see exactly kind of where the vulnerability or exposure may be. But in terms of what the question is asking, remember, you got to simplify and interpret what they're asking. So they're really testing your knowledge to see if you understand the difference between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS, software as a service, right? Because they're asking about the SaaS model, because that's why they include it in the question. So what that should indicate to you is that when it comes to responsibility, you should rephrase the question to say, who is ultimately responsible for maintenance and security in a SaaS model? Of course, the answer is the SaaS provider. So I would interpret their question by testing to see if I know, again, the difference between the cloud deployment models, and that would tell me who is responsible, no matter what it is, security, maintenance, patching, whatever. Its ultimate responsibility is always going to be the SaaS provider. So in a way, this answer choice kind of fits better into one of the kind of principles, right, or themes of the CSSP exam, right? So when they, for example, it's a very common question that they'll ask you in Domain 2 as well, when they ask about the different roles between data owners and data custodians. No matter what the circumstances are, when they say who's responsible, that is a kind of a trigger in your brain that should say who is ultimately responsible for the security of that data. The answer is always going to be data owners, right? So again, this is, I think, Ashraf, you can let me know if you think I got this question right, but the whole thing is this is a example of thinking like the test maker, thinking along with them, kind of putting your personal experience kind of on the back burner while you're sitting for the exam, thinking about what do they want from me, what does the test maker want me to choose. Remember, it's not what you want or what you think it's right, it's what the test maker thinks is right. Okay, so I hope this is helpful. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully kind of thinking like the test maker and not thinking like a security practitioner. You got to practice that test day strategy in action. And I love getting questions from the audience, from you guys. So please, if there's anything you want me to cover, any specific questions, please just throw it into the comments or shoot me an email. And we'll see you